Welcome back to the Robert Davi Show. I am Brian Oxman sitting in for Robert Davi. I want to turn to David Fischer. He is the CEO of Landmark Capital. He really is the guy who knows what's going on in the financial markets, both in America and around the world, and in particular the gold market, which he deals with in every single day. Hey there, David. How are you doing?
I'm doing great this afternoon. How are you doing, Brian?
Well, we're causing trouble. And, I put out to all my listeners, would you return the two properties? It's a property in Maryland and Maine where we grabbed it from the Russians to punish them for interfering with the election in 2016. Would you return it? Because they're demanding a return of their property today. So I'm taking a poll. What do you say there, David?
I say no. I say no on that one. Follow what Nancy Reagan said. Keep it.
Just say no. Absolutely. Oh, my.
Hey,
I got to say.
Seize people's property, and if it's Russia interfered with our elections, let's hold it hostage and, keep it for a while.
This is something you have talked about. You've called it the bail-in. And it is about seizing people's property. It is a real live problem, and you've dealt with this and talked about it extensively. What is the likelihood of a bail-in taking place in today's market?
Well, it's property being financial assets in electronic investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and money in banks. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. Nobody knows that. But what I can say, it's happened in 9 countries, and this is the new model, Brian, to deal with our financial calamity that's getting ready to happen and deal with our debt. So there's more information in our country than all the 9 countries combined setting it up in America. And
Wow.
It's well documented. I got a report on it, and people can get that and get informed. It's pretty shocking.
Where do they go? Where do they go to get that report, David?
They can call us at 855-747-5947 or go to our website at landmarkgold.com.
One of the things which I think is so important is the warning signs which appear on the horizon. And today is a big warning sign. They're just raising the flags. They're waving the red banners at the Bank of England. And they're saying that we're facing the biggest seismic risk since 2008. What is the Bank of England telling us, and shouldn't we be paying attention?
Well, first of all, I'm not a doomsayer, but we do talk about what people are saying, and there's a lot more people saying more things today about another 2008 getting ready to happen than we saw previous to 2008, and most people ignored the warning signs then, so this is why we're talking about it. But what we're referring to is the Bank of England is warning that there is a big over the weekend, there's a bigger systemic risk now, currently, than there was in previous 2008. And the arm of Bank of England called Prudential Regulation Authority, Prudential, nothing to do with the Prudential Insurance Company, but this is what they call it there, PRA. They are concerns about the financial system, and they both have issued stark warning against their banks in Europe. And this has happened. The two bodies have issued papers in less than 1 week, and multiple speeches towards the industry and the banks that they're doing the same exact mistakes, I'm reading from the report, that led to the 2008 financial crisis. And what I'm referring to is leveraged money. It goes on in the report that the European corporate bond market concludes that the corporate bond market could create more instability during the next financial shock coming than it did in the crisis of 2008. And they're doing what you call shenanigans, is what the Bank of England calls it. In their
they called it balance sheet trickery. The report today.
Trickery. Yep.
Wow.
So they're doing the shell game, which is what central banks and banks do to free up money to create risky assets, and this is what brought down the system, and it's worse, according today by the Bank of England, in the banks in England than it was pre-2008 crisis, and they're sending out the warning, and they're telling them to stop it. Of course, I don't know if they will or not, but that's what's happening.
Is it just that you have a market which has so much money flowing in it that this kind of thing automatically happens when you get a market which is so liquid, so filled with money and is oversold like the market is now? Is this just endemic to the circumstance of a big bull market?
Well, part of it is bull market, but part of it, Brian, is just the behavior of banks. They got hit really bad in 2008, and just like most people do not believe the economics recovered, they just put a Band-Aid on it. The banks are doing the same behavior because they make so much more money in these risky assets called derivatives than they do just by making a bank loan, evidenced by Deutsche Bank, what we talked about in the past. So this is an environment where the greedy are getting greedy again, which that has always led to some financial problems. This is such a much larger magnitude than what we saw in 2008. So this is why they're sending out the warning. So this is what we call systemic risk. It doesn't have to be in our stock market. It doesn't have to be in our banking system because we live all in a global network together. That's why what happened in America in 2008 affected the whole world. It could come from Europe this time, which we have no control over.
I just have visions of Ben Bernanke, the Federal Reserve Chairman, getting down on his knees to Nancy Pelosi saying, please, please do something, fix this. Are we in for that kind of a thing again, David?
Well, it's getting closer to that. And the behavior, the problem is this, in some aspects it's worse from the leverage side. Banks are more leveraged today than it was before 2008. But the problem is, and what makes it worse today is we had the ability that the Fed could bail out banks. Today, the Fed can't bail it out. They have a $4.5 trillion balance sheet that they got to unravel, and by their own admittance that they have to unravel this. And that's what Janet Yellen spoke about last week, and we talked a little bit about that. When the Fed has to unravel their $4.5 trillion balance sheet, which ironically is 60% of that is Treasury bills, and they're the biggest buyer. They own 40% of all the Treasuries in the world, and they got to stop buying Treasuries and unravel this balance sheet and go backwards what they started for 10 years. That creates a whole economic environment that creates instability, and that's why people like Jamie Dimon and others are coming out and saying the Fed might not know what they're doing right now because it could create just utter chaos by unraveling their balance sheet because they've never done this before. Of course, they've never ballooned it either. So we're facing a lot of uncertainty. It could be a bank triggered by systemic risk. It could be just the Fed trying to get liquid and unraveling a $4.5 trillion balance sheet that could trigger something. And once it gets triggered, Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, they all went under in a matter of a couple of days.
Oh, my. And, when I listen to this, David, I just think, investing in gold is such a good idea. You can go to David Fischer's Landmark Capital. Call him at 855-747-5947. It's landmarkgold.com. 855-747-5947. Give David a call, because the situation right now, it's oversold and unpredictable. I am Brian Oxman, sitting in for Robert Davi. I want you to stay with us. And David, can you stay with us?
Absolutely.
You bet, and we're going to be right back. Welcome back. I am Brian Oxman, sitting in for Robert Davi here on the Robert Davi Show. We're talking to David Fischer. He is the CEO of Landmark Capital. He deals every day in the investment of gold, an incredible market which protects from the absolute craziness that we're seeing in financial markets around the world. You can call David at 855-747-5947. You can go to his website, landmarkgold.com. It's 855-747-5947. And David, we were talking about the instability of financial markets because in the last, I guess it is 2 months, 8 weeks or so, you have talked about hedge fund managers. They're talking about the warning signs too, just like the Bank of England today in their report. What are the hedge fund managers saying?
Well, not only besides hedge fund managers, we've had Deutsche Bank now enter the group of hedge fund managers. Last week it was Jason Harp, one of the hedge fund managers that manages $3.7 billion. He was putting out
Wow.
the warning out there. Now Deutsche
Wow.
Bank is coming to the part of the party and joining the warning by the chief economist. And Goldman Sachs is chiming in also. Their economic team is writing over the weekend, warning about risk levels and asset prices in the market. And Morgan Stanley came out and joined the club. This is all over the weekend now, just these three major ones. But a person that we've talked about in the past, he made a more stern remark over the weekend. His name is Ray Diallo. He's the chairman of Bridgewater Associates, and he wrote out in his quarterly report, which came out last week, that the global economy is headed to a new stage where markets will not get the same level of support from global monetary policymakers. In other words, central banks that support the market. And he's saying that they've ran out of ammo from their toolkit, and they're getting ready for the next recession. Always there's been a precursor to a recession when they start hiking interest rates, and that's where we're headed until they restructure the debt and the entitlement mess that we're faced in the United States. And we're ending the long debt super cycle. In other words, they're done creating a huge amount of debt. Now they got to deal with the debt problem, and that's what the new problem is trying to deal with this debt. So this could start to unravel. This is what everybody's talking about with the Fed balance sheet. Even Jamie Dimon chimed in about it a little bit, and also he mostly chimed in about the government. He's saying how it's dysfunctional in Washington, and yet it manages still to deliver its growth. And
How can you say that? How can you say that?
He got a lot of riff and backlash for saying things that were the very obvious, the elephant in the room. And he even said, given the role and the importance of the U.S. into the interconnected global economy and the rest of the world, America has normally had friends and allies on our side, but now they're not looking with curiosity anymore, but they're looking with concern and confusion. So he's saying it's the foreign businesses and government leaders are now expressing huge concern about the damage of the U.S. political dysfunctional system. These are strong words. Diamond clearly rang the alarm bell.
Unreal.
And, this is not a good thing for our country, obviously, because, let's admit it, we have a dysfunctional government that can't pass a bill. Just a couple of years ago, Obama wanted to pass a $1 trillion spending bill. Democrats loved it. Republicans fought it and hated it, and it never passed. The same bill Trump wants to pass, Republicans love it, Democrats hate it.
It is ridiculous. It is schizophrenic, without a doubt. Where do people go to get some common sense, to invest in things which are stable, safe, which is really gold? It's been historically that way. Where do people go to get in contact with you?
Well, they can call our company, and why they do that is because when this starts to unravel, it unravels on quickly, and gold went up 72% in the unraveling. They can call us by 855-747 5947, or go to landmarkgold.com and learn how to get diversified and protected from all this.
You mentioned Janet Yellen, and she is reputed to be probably the most powerful woman in the world. She is head of the Federal Reserve Bank, the chairwoman of the Fed, and she's testified before Congress, but she just kind of seems oblivious to all this. Is Janet Yellen not thinking right? Is she not really there to understand what's going on, or is she trying to just make people calm in the face of a rising danger?
This is making people calm in the face of rising danger. She's like the preschooler who's getting ready to drive the car for the first time and can't touch the pedals. The Fed cannot deal with this environment of $4.5 trillion. They don't know how to unravel this. They've been doing tests on this, Brian, for the last 5 years, and every single test has failed. So Janet Yellen is unwinding the $4.5 trillion balance sheet with no plan. And this is what Jamie Dimon said, it could be little more than disruptive because they're selling U.S. Treasuries, bonds, which when that happens, the bond market's going to go down, and when that happens, people see it's a good value because it's going to hit bottom and start to go up because rates are rising, so people will hop out of stocks to buy bonds. That's what happens in this environment. So she could cause the next financial calamity, actually, by unwinding the balance sheet.
My goodness gracious. You can go to David's website. It's landmarkgold.com. You can get his publication, Changing Directions in Changing Times. Give David Fischer a call, 855-747-5947. The website is landmarkgold.com. And David Fischer, you're amazing, and I thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you for having me, Brian.
You bet. David Fischer, 855-747-5947. You're listening to Brian Oxman here on the Robert Davi program.